Welcome to the Andrea Giovino Show. I'd like to thank all my subscribers that continue to subscribe. I like the comments. I feel like we could interact, so please feel free to leave comments. Thank you, Jesus, for giving me this platform. And we have back today Hollywood Wade from Crime and Entertainment, because I wanted to ask Wade. Hi, Wade. Thank you for coming back in.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
I wanted to ask you about, you're not from this culture.
No.
You weren't a criminal. You did have a criminal offense charge against you due to what happened to you, which was unfortunate. And what made you come into organized crime, this genre?
Well, it was kind of like an accident, really. But I've always been a fan of this culture and its history. So, you know, there's a reason why The Godfather is considered the best movie that's ever made. There's a reason why Sopranos is considered the best TV show ever made. And those two have very similar parallels, and that's not by accident. You know, the Goodfellas is always up there, and it's talked about as one of the best movies ever made. So I always grew up liking those movies. I think Goodfellas was the first one I ever seen, and then a Casino, excuse me. And then my dad tells me all those guys were in another movie called Goodfellas. You should go watch that. So then I go watch Goodfellas, and then I backtrack and watch all the Godfathers. Then when the Sopranos come on, you know, to steal the term, forget about it. It was every Sunday. That was church on my house, you know, on Sunday. Loved it. Still watch it over and over. Been fortunate enough to interview a lot of guys from that show. But the mob stuff really just kind of happened by accident, because I started a YouTube channel while I was on house arrest.
Yes.
I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do anything. And I think I mentioned a story off air. The guy asked me that I was kind of helping me along. He's like, what do you want to cover? And I'm like, well, I want to cover true crime and different aspects, but also like TV shows, movies, different things. And he's like, so you want to do crime and entertainment? And I'm like, you know what? That's a pretty good name. And
I do like that name.
Yeah, it encompasses everything. So I wouldn't consider myself or my channel like strictly mob, but I do have a lot of people from that genre. And I think probably one of the first guys that I interviewed, he was an FBI mole for the Chicago outfit. His name was Red Wilmette. And he was a very interesting guy. And it done some decent numbers on my show. So I started seeking out other people that, you know, had channels. I wound up getting involved with Anthony Ruggiano, and it just kind of started snowballing. And, you know, I can have other guests on that have great stories, but the people from the mob and the life, those numbers are always just slightly better.
Because I think not just our country, I know, because when I recently did Netflix, which is around the world, I've always done, you know, TV shows here in the country, but when it went around the world, I couldn't believe that around the world people are fascinated with the Italian organized crime or crime in America. Then you add mobsters, they love it. They just love it. It never goes like out of style, or it's never going to go away. But
you have those names that are just going to, you know, live in infamy. Capone, Luciano, Gotti. I mean, you know, how long has Gotti been, you know, since he got taken off the street?
Since the 80s.
And, you know, you do a documentary about him now, and it goes like it did.
It went viral. I mean, the documentary was running #1 for weeks.
And when you think about how much stuff Netflix puts out.
Right.
And for that to maintain that
spot. It was
spot.
#1 in 44 countries. That's a big deal.
Yeah. And that lets you know how much of an impact, you know, that genre had, because people from all walks of life know them. It doesn't matter if you're African American or whatever. Like, so many hip hop videos from the hip hop community, if you've watched those movies in the past, they've mimicked a lot of the stuff that went on. Like old Ja Rule videos. Ja Rule, back when he was hot, you know, in the mid-90s, he would have these little skits in the front of his music videos that were like parallel and takes
it's
from
so
Goodfellas.
funny, because on the way here, you know, as you know, I talk to Mark Ryder all the time. Actually, I was on his show.
I heard that.
I heard Livy, and then Mark had called, and it looks like a good shot he gets out, and it gets out, he's coming right on the show.
That's
and
good.
Then I'm going to help him, because let's face it, he doesn't know he's been incarcerated for 36 years now. Book him on other shows, and get his story out there, because there's so much to his story, and he's the last man standing as far as who was in with all those people. So, and he, you know, he wants this go on shows.
I'd love to have him. He's a very interesting.
Very interesting. He's
guy.
got a great stories. And I'm sure he's got amazing stories probably just from being in there because like he sees people coming and going. You got to remember that too.
And I think the key to this too, and being able to make it work, you have to interview people and you give everybody the same respect because as you well know, there's going to be people inside this genre that don't necessarily agree, don't necessarily like each other. It's my job as the interviewer to not get involved in the personal side of things.
No, you can't. You cannot. You cannot get, and it's YouTube.
Right.
It's YouTube. I mean, I've taken a lot of lashes, number one, because I'm a woman.
Right.
And a lot, I think it's 95 or 94% male.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've taken a lot of lashes. It's been hard for me to pave the way for my channel, but I keep staying the course and putting out the facts. And people are starting to realize like, oh, wow, she did know these people. Oh, wow, this was true. So it's just like, it was a little bit harder for me. People think it was easier because I had the jump start with Get Gotti and being on Netflix, but not really, because a lot of men like cannot comprehend a woman that was in the streets.
Right.
And then I think that a lot of it got misinterpreted by what Netflix did,
100%.
saying, and
we covered that when I interviewed you.
And we covered that, and associate. I didn't put associate. They should have just put friend. I was a good friend, to John. So that had to get straightened out. And, you cleared it up a lot on your
and that's
channel.
important because people don't realize how much, and I don't even really want to say out of context, but it's the way they edit it. It does make it seem like it's out of context, but it's the way they edit it. You're telling a story when you say we're sitting around the table talking about murders, but you were talking about the people that you were involved with.
My family,
yeah,
exactly, not them.
But the way they seam it together,
they put it together.
It's like you're talking like you were at a table with John Gotti. So of course the masses are going to be like, he would never sit at the table.
But that's not what it was.
Right.
It wasn't that. It was in my own family. And yes, did that happen? Of course it did. But it's the way they patch it together. But I mean, overall, I'm a firm believer that when you tell the truth and you continue to tell the truth prevails. There's no reason for me to lie or mix things up, or there's enough people out there that, like I said, around the world that want to hear like these stories. And I was really interested in that. You're not from the background.
Right.
You're not a criminal. What would make someone, and there are other podcasters, guys, that aren't, from this background, and they're in this genre because people are interested in it.
Yeah. And I have a kind of an offsetting way to compare because, I was a straight guy, I was a blue collar guy, and I'd done, even though it was a shooting that happened in my background, I'd done everything by the book. I've done it the right way. I was a licensed CWP holder. I immediately called law enforcement. I didn't try to do anything shady or whatever. And I still got, basically jammed up by the cops. I had to spend over $100,000 in legal fees.
Wow.
I was fired from my job, name banned in the newspaper because you can't say anything back. You can't respond. So you just got to sit there and take it. And I was, a straight-laced guy. Imagine what they did to guys that weren't to try to jam them up. So I have an interesting concept to kind of parallel with their views because they're doing stuff that is illegal. The cops are after them. So if they done all that to me, imagine the dirty stuff that probably went on to try to put those guys away.
Yeah. And then the person, in any cultural background that cannot afford a good attorney, they get jammed up.
Yeah.
They get jammed up and they get sent away, which is actually really sad because they're worried about their job opposed to worrying about what a human being is going to experience behind bars.
Oh, yeah.
Now, how long did you have to stay behind bars?
I was actually only in jail a couple of days.
Okay.
But largely a lot of that, I think, was due to the fact that I had a very high-profile criminal attorney.
Right.
The right attorney makes all the difference in the world.
I believe that wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
You have a good attorney, you have money to get a good attorney, you're going to have a good shot at beating your case.
Yeah, and getting
or fighting
bond.
your case and getting a good deal.
Yeah, and getting bond, because if you got a high-profile attorney, then the risk they think of you skipping town or something like that is
Right.
minimal. You're not paying a guy $60,000 to take a murder case just to run away.
Plus, with your case, it was, I guess, something that you needed to, get out and tell the truth. Like, this is what happened to me. I was the victim here. It's not like you were lying about anything. You were like, I'm the victim. He's choking me. He punched me.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a crazy story to begin with on how that all came about.
Yeah, and when I started my show, I never talked about it.
Right.
I couldn't because it was still going on. So
Right,
the lawyer's
you probably
like,
weren't legally allowed.
yeah, the lawyer told me, he's like, look, if you want to do a show, that's fine. He's like, but you can't talk about your thing. And I said, no, I'm not. And I was like, now when it's over, that's a different story. Because I feel I went through this. I tell my wife this all the time. I went through this for a reason. And I feel like now it's my duty to share some of the stories of these guys that weren't as fortunate as me to have the financial means to get a good lawyer, to get good legal representation, to beat it. Because my lawyer even told me, he said, they'll probably offer you a plea deal. And with that, because I'd been out for 5 years, he said, I'm going to bet they're going to come and offer you, maybe plead it down, aggravated battery or involuntary manslaughter or something like that, and say, we'll do 5 years, but this has been going on 5 years, so time served, you don't have to go to prison.
Right.
So at that point, that's a big carrot to hang in front of somebody.
And also, you have to remember, not just you, it was probably very hard on your family, the kids, your wife, what they're going through. It was a lot on everybody.
It was, and believe it or not, the podcast was a form of therapy for me.
Right.
Because I had that hour, and change, a distraction of interviewing, hearing somebody's story. Then you have the editing, and it's not an easy thing. I'm a one-man show. I do it all myself. And then you have all your apps, your TikToks, your Instagrams, Facebook, YouTube, Shorts. It's a lot. If you want to do a good job, it's a lot of work. And so that helped me.
You put out a good show.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, as do you. Mm-hmm. But it's a lot of work if you want to do it. So it was something that I think was very therapeutic for me. And then once it finally got dropped, being able to go on and finally, after 5 years of telling my story, and it really helped. And a lot of guys were shocked because they had,
it's therapy.
Went on my show, but they didn't know I was involved in all this. Like Reggiano, when I told him, he was like, what? And I was like, oh, yeah, I had it going. He's like, when did this happen? I told him, he's like, so all this was going on while we were doing our shows? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, I had no idea. He's like, you carried it well. And I was like, well you learn.
Well, I'm glad you came on. Mm-hmm. I'm glad that we got some more information from you about, your life, how you started the podcast. And is there anything else you would like to tell the audience?
You can find us pretty much anywhere you get your podcast. We're on YouTube. You just search Crime and Entertainment, so everything is video form there. All the audio, major platforms, Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon. We do one show a week at least. Every now and again, if we get like a breaking interview or something, we might do 2 a week, but we at least do one show a week. We usually drop them on Sundays. And like, subscribe, follow along. We're on TikToks, Instagram, all that. You can find all the links to the show notes on our YouTube page.
Crime and Entertainment. Thank you so much, Wade.
Thank you for having me back.
Thank you, Jesus, for this platform. And thank you all for tuning in. Please continue to subscribe and leave comments. Thank you.